Marathon racing shoes have recently gone through some major innovations, leading to much faster times. In 2019, Eliud Kipchoge ran a marathon distance in under 2 hours. That was at a pace of around 4:35, 4:36 minutes per mile. So we've been thinking a lot about the technology that goes into these shoes. So today I brought in a few runners that all race for different companies, so we can learn a bit about what Saucony, Asics, and Adidas are all doing with their technology to make these shoes even better for the athletes. So I've got Connor McMillan here. He runs for Adidas. He ran a 2:12:07 in the New York City Marathon last year. That was his first marathon out of college. Very good debut time there. If you're not sure what these numbers mean, then get cleared by a physician, go to a gym, put the treadmill at 12 miles per hour, and see if you can make it for over 2 hours. And if so, then give me a call and we need to talk. Clayton Young, he is perhaps the only person that's ever qualified and raced in the 5K and 10K at the NCAA championships 3 years in a row. In the last 10K that he raced, as a collegian, he won the NCAA championships. He's focusing mainly on track and gradually drifting over time to looking at the marathon as something in the future. Jared Ward has run some very good times in the last few years. He's right now the number 13 all-time American for marathon with a time of 2:09:25. He also finished 6th at the Olympic Games in Rio. All three of these athletes were able to qualify and compete in the recent US Olympic Trials marathon. The shoes you're using have received a lot of attention lately. What is different about the construction of these shoes that makes them more effective than the traditional options?
I think there are probably two really effective components. One is the foam. It's almost like a spring, but it's not a spring. Springs are illegal, but it's really bouncy foam. So, you step and push off and it will propel you back. And then there's also rigid elements inside the shoe that help to facilitate better running mechanics.
There's a few components I feel like. I guess I would say the main component is the foam, but shape has taken a drastic turn, and the stiff plate inside of the foam gives us the flexibility to use more low density foam than we have been able to in the past. And so, I don't know, I really think that the new aspect to these shoes is a triple threat effect of foam, plate, and shape, but probably the main component being the foam.
Yeah, good question. I think the biggest difference that I have felt in a marathon shoe is its ability to propel you forward through the carbon fiber plate and also the foam that's within it. Just that extra bounce, that energy that returns when you step down, really just wants to make you keep going.
So if less energy is required for someone to run at a given pace, how much faster will their time end up being?
They feel faster for sure. I don't know exactly what it translates to, but just kind of in workouts, like tempo runs, workouts on the road, a few seconds a mile, maybe 4 seconds a mile.
Conventional knowledge, I guess, for the limited research we have is maybe half that. So I'm 3% more efficient aerobically, so I run 1 to 2% faster. But that's only a part of the story when considering marathon shoes, because this shoe is going to reduce the eccentric loading that my muscles have to do when I'm running compared with a more minimal shoe like this. And so at the end of a marathon, my muscles are less broken up. And it's not necessarily at the end of a marathon that I'm breathing hard and in oxygen debt and couldn't talk to you if you were running next to me. In fact, if you could keep up with me, we could talk. Well, I could talk. But it's not an aerobic concern at that point. It's not like I'm breathing so hard that that I'm not getting enough oxygen. My legs are flat. And so I think there's some work to be done studying what these shoes are doing to preserve legs and muscle tissue towards the end of a race. And we notice, you know, I notice, and there seems to be a consensus about how much quicker legs and muscles are recovering after a marathon in the newer versions of shoes, of racing shoes, as compared to old ones. And so, so there's a lot of work to be done in terms of how much faster these shoes are making an athlete in a race.
Are these shoes so much better that there's actually a psychological benefit for those that are wearing them?
Yeah, as I've transitioned from being a Nike athlete as a collegiate to becoming a pro athlete for ASICS, there's a really big difference in the shoe technology that ASICS had at the time. So a lot of my early races were without the marathon shoe technology that's really prevalent right now. And towing the line next to somebody that's wearing a brand new, right off the shelf, latest technology Nike shoe definitely was intimidating. And I think it honestly hurt me more psychologically than it did physically. But really at the end of the day, you kind of had to just, you know, believe in what you had, believe in the company that you're with, and believe that they could innovate something just as good or better. And I definitely have seen that as all kind of companies have jumped on board and created great products and really pushed each other to create great marathon shoes.
In a longer race, in a marathon, half marathon distance, it definitely, you know, can kind of give you a mental edge knowing that, you know, maybe it'll make you a few seconds faster a mile than, you know, your competition with a minimal shoe, you know, and especially when like the difference between winning and losing at a high level in the sport is so small, it's definitely helpful to have that edge.
Are these shoes only good for marathoning, or could there be a benefit to wearing them for shorter races?
You know, I definitely believe that there's a good hybrid between a spike and a marathon shoe that would actually be ideal. And I'm still waiting for somebody to innovate that. Leading up into the NCAA 10K, there was a chance that there was going to be rain. And so there was a little bit of risk trying to decide, okay, should I wear spikes because the track might be slick, or should I wear something that I'm more comfortable in, that being the Vaporfly. And really, at the end of the day, I decided to go with the Vaporfly for two reasons. Number one, I had done some track workouts that I could close a 400 meter in 55 seconds in a Vaporfly. And I was like, well, I'm not going to really need that kind of speed in a 10K. So I don't think the Vaporfly is holding me back in that regard. And the other big reason was I was coming back for the 5K 2 days later. And these marathon shoes are kind to the body. They make it so you don't get fatigued as often. You don't get sore Achilles and calves from wearing spikes. So that was one of the big reasons I wanted to come back 2 days later in the 5K and be able to have fresh legs and to give it a chance. But kind of going back to, you know, I think that there's a good balance between the spike and the marathon shoe that they should develop. You look at the newer marathon shoes and they have a really high stack height. And that can kind of be precarious when going around the corners, especially really fast on a track. But I think if they lowered it a little bit, kind of like their original marathon shoe, this is the ASICS Meta Racer, it's got a little bit lower stack height, but then they put maybe very minimal spikes on the bottom. I think you'd have the best of both worlds, where you could still have that agility on the corners, but that raw speed as well from the spikes, as well as, you know, the cushion and the protection from the stack height.
The thickness of these shoes make them appear quite heavy. What is the way to determine the balance between adding content to the shoes while keeping the mass relatively low?
Well, we still have to figure that out. I mean, it seemed like in the running world for decades, the game was get your shoe lighter. I mean, this is the shoe that I ran marathons in for my first half dozen marathons, because it was the lightest shoe I could find, and it's really light. But what happened a few years ago in the running world was the industry was tipped on its side because a shoe was put out there that all of a sudden wasn't necessarily lighter or thinner or more low profile, but people were running faster in it. And I think that introduced a new dynamic of thinking in terms of what can we do to create shoes that are going to make a runner faster besides just making the shoe lighter. Now we know lighter is better, okay, all things equal, but all things aren't equal, right? This shoe is heavier, but there's a lot more cushioning and I run faster in these shoes. So how much mass do we want to add? I don't know that we know the answer to that yet. Maybe you can go figure that out for me. But we know that this shoe is faster than this shoe for me.
You only want the foam to be as thick as the rigid elements within the shoe are gonna help when they interact with each other. So if you have, you know, a 40 millimeter stack height and you find that in the lab that's, you know, the best you can do with one plate, maybe you could put in another plate and, you know, do 50 millimeter stack height. But the rules say, you know, you can only have one plate. So you just have to find whatever works with one plate. And I think that's, you know, they've definitely optimized this shoe to find the stack height that works best with a single plate. And then, you know, at the same time, the more foam you add, the higher the shoe. You might get more energy return, but you're also going to get a diminishing return for more weight in the shoe.
All of you have focused on the benefits of the foam in the shoe. What about the carbon fiber plate? What's the purpose of that?
Well, we're still trying to figure out why we need and what a carbon fiber plate adds. And we're doing research on what type of stiffness is optimal and learning that that's maybe different by person. But I think really what we know about a plate right now is that it gives rigidity to the shoe and allows us to use lower density foam.
So how stiff does this carbon fiber plate need to be?
Well, at this point, it's educated guessing. You know, we looked at 6 different stiffnesses of shoes, and frankly, we found that it's just so different person to person. So we got a lot of things to figure out in terms of how somebody runs and creating a shoe that's going to make that person more efficient. And, you know, we make a blanket statement with these shoes in terms of the added benefit to energy cost. The shoe's 4% better or 3% better or whatever it is, but that's an average. And we have some people who are 6% better in a shoe and some people who are no different in that shoe. And I think the stiffness of plate, among a few other things, are going to be a factor in determining how to make shoes that make a specific runner faster, maybe based on some of their mechanics.
What other modifications to a shoe might be effective along with the differences in the foam and the carbon fiber plate?
Something that ASICS advertises that their shoe does, maybe a little bit more so than others, is what they call guide sole technology. So if you see this shoe here, it's got a little curve upwards more than usual. And supposedly that's supposed to help reduce the amount of ankle flexion that is happening in the body. And so those lower extremity muscles aren't supposed to fatigue as much. And so those later miles in the marathon are supposed to feel a little bit better. So that combined with the carbon fiber plate and the foam is what is supposed to help you run further and faster.
Do you feel like when you wear these shoes, your running mechanics are altered?
Yeah, I do feel like the shoes affect my running mechanics. One of the first things that I recognized running in this shoe at marathon pace was it felt like my body was at more of a half marathon cadence. The feel was more half marathon, meaning I was just a little bit more assertive in my posture. My hips were under me a little bit more. I was landing maybe a little bit more midfoot as opposed to the true heel striker that I am. And I just felt like sitting back into what I felt like was a marathon rhythm was tough, and the shoes were just more assertive. So I do feel different. I do feel like my mechanics are different in these shoes.
Honestly, I think it helps me to be a little bit more of a heel striker, not on my toes as much. I think that's simply because as you roll from heel to toe, that's what kind of propels you forward. And so that's something I've actually had to be a little bit careful with as I've changed between marathon shoes to spikes. I've had to learn to transition from my heel to toe to kind of being more midfoot and toe when I'm in spikes.
Although the rules have recently gone through some changes which put restrictions on some of the design of current racing shoes, there's still some room for improvement, whether it's from chemical engineers determining more effective ways to create the foam to perhaps be a lower density and give a better energy return. Maybe it's something with the carbon fiber plate shape, perhaps even the shape of the shoe, maybe some other factors we haven't even considered today. So the question still remains, though, of is it right to have the shoe be what makes the person fast rather than just seeing how fast can this person run? Now, the primary factor of how good someone's going to be at running is dealing with their genetics along with what they do with their activity to become really fit. So we're still measuring the fitness of these athletes and how prepared they are on the race day for their performance. And the shoes are relatively similar across the athletes these days. And there'll continue to be little improvements company by company that will make the athletes even quicker. But this is only a small fraction of what determines their performance time on any given day. So I like to look at it as similar to what we saw in tennis. If you think of the 70s, we had wooden tennis rackets that transitioned to aluminum rackets, and then other types of materials that have transitioned through to what we see today. Even the shapes of tennis rackets have changed and the technologies used to design the strings. And that definitely changed the performance of the game of tennis. We see generally the same strategy, but a lot different ball speeds and different athletes that are excelling in those events. So we're seeing similar things going on in footwear, although the changes might not be as dramatic as what we see in some other athletic competitive events. So from here, we'll see within the rules that are prescribed what can be done to make these shoes as fast as possible.
It's also the tallest. It has 39.5 millimeters in the heel and then 29.5 in the toe. And also, it doesn't have one solid carbon fiber piece throughout. It's got like half, and then it's got energy rods in the forefoot.
What does energy rod even
Energy
mean?
rods.
It means it gives you energy, obviously.
It doesn't matter how tall they are, man. It matters what kind of energy return you're getting.
Getting
You
big
keep
returns.
that weight off.
You know what it's all about? It's all about the guide sole technology.
No, I think my shape is better.